Good afternoon. My name is Johannes Hesketh, and I'll be talking to you about curriculum design. We've narrowed it down to a 10-minute slot, so I'll focus on the diversifying part of curriculum design. And at the end, I'll leave my details if any of you want any details about some of the work we've done cross-curricular wise. So I work at Coombe Girls' School, and I teach physics, as well as being the head of science. So, like most schools, we've spent some time over the last few years trying to improve our curriculum. It's obviously an ongoing process, but it's given some extra momentum, shall we say, with a new Ofsted framework, with the Black Lives Matter movement, and obviously the pandemic has had us, forced us to revisit and review some of the things we do and how well they work. So let me talk a little bit about what we've been doing. So the first thing to mention is you want to, get your department involved. That sounds obvious, but more is more in this case. I am painfully aware that I am a white man trying to diversify a curriculum, and yet another white man teaching physics. And so we want to get, as many people involved as possible. Our school's also arranged some CPD for us. So we've had external speakers come in. There's some literature that you can ask me about that I've been reading. So more is more in this case. And then you also want to think about your context. Obviously, we'd like to, our curriculum to be as diverse as possible in all possible ways. But I feel at our school, being a science department, being a girls' school, focusing on gender stereotypes, role models within science is probably the most important aspect of diversity to focus on. And then finally, you've got to be a little bit honest. There's not really any way to get around the fact that Isaac Newton was and is a big figure in science. We're going to have to mention him. The same for, there'll be things in your subject that applies to. So we can't pretend that's not the case. So let's not do that. Let's look at how we can diversify the curriculum, but again, being honest about what is there and what is going to be on the exam. If you're familiar with education, you've probably heard about opinions from various people, Ms. Birtelsing being one of them. You'll have your opinions, her opinions, I'm sure, but she's a perfect example of someone in the news recently speaking about girls in physics. And another reason why it's so important for us to really focus on our curriculum being diverse and students seeing themselves in our curriculum. So when we set about doing this, again, sounds obvious, but put it in your curriculum as a very obvious thing. I don't believe that's tokenistic. I think that's there as a constant reminder, as sort of an expectation that there will be, when we plan a scheme of work, a real thought process behind and a real inclusion of diversity. Now, my department and I sort of joked last year as we were working on this that, we were expected to fix racism in a year 7 scheme of work. And, it was a very big and, daunting task that seemed sort of almost beyond us. But I think what's really important here is you get started on the process. And if it's there explicitly, people have got to put something in, but, lead by example. Leave a few gaps in, show that you don't have all the answers, because let's be honest, we don't. And it's a huge ongoing task, this project that we're sort of undertaking. And so, just try to squeeze in a little bit for sort of a screenshot from our year 7 scheme of work on chemistry. There is a bit there in the last column about how we've sort of made a couple of mentions of some etymology, some scientists who people might not have heard of, talking a little bit about the history history behind some of the things that we're talking about. And again, there's lots of gaps. It's not exactly, the complete final product, but people can see that we're working on it. And then when we come to review these schemes of work, as always happens, people, we did this. How about we include this? Or, we haven't thought about something for this lesson. Could we include this? So, have it there explicitly, but leave the gaps, make it okay to not have all the answers yet, but just get people started on the process, get people thinking about it. So there's some difficult conversations we had, but I thought I'd start with the easy wins and then move on to the trickier stuff later. There are 3 really easy things you can do to get your curriculum ever so slightly more diverse if there aren't any obvious things, staring you in the face. So one thing that works really well is etymology. So any keywords from the lesson you're teaching, chances are that something somewhere won't be Anglo-Saxon, and even if it is, that can be interesting enough. But there'll be a lot of words that sort of help make it obvious that the stuff we're teaching, this knowledge goes back thousands and thousands of years. Similar to that, if you have to talk about Isaac Newton, go back and find out who laid the foundations for Isaac Newton. That's also a big part of science, is talking about what came before, standing on the shoulder of giants. And so if Isaac Newton discovered or thought of all these things, well, who came before him? Who inspired him? Who inspired them? Who has he inspired? It isn't just dead European white men from the Renaissance. They built on things. And finally, if again something obvious doesn't pop up, look at the equipment they used. Anything from pens, observatories, telescopes, whatever it might be in your subject, there'll be something there that, again, dates back to something or someone else invented who's not just this dead European white man, as it were. So here's a couple of examples talking about, the first people to do some chemistry, not just the ones mentioned on the GCSE scheme of work, some etymology. So we use gauze as part of our experiments, and that's not originally an English word. So that's quite interesting. When we talk about Copernicus, we've mentioned him because he's in the scheme of work and in the curriculum, but then we go back and we say, okay, day and night, Earth revolving around the sun, all this kind of stuff. Well, a lot of astronomers from Baghdad right around 1000 AD did big stuff. There was a lot of maths that went into that. Talking about refraction, how light behaves, looking at their observatories. And so looking at how Copernicus built on these people's work makes it so much more rich and so much more interesting and diverse. This morning, to sort of try and see how easy it was to do, I picked something. I remember learning about the Industrial Revolution in school, and 2 minutes on Wikipedia threw up all of this stuff, which I've just copied and pasted. And there's a lot of people there who don't sound like they're from England a few hundred years ago. So there's a lot of stuff we can talk about there of what came before, and there'll be similar instances in your subjects. So that's a really sort of, those are some easy wins, those three things there, excuse me. Look at the etymology of key terms, look at equipment that people in your subject used, and then look back at who first looked into something or who inspired the people you're teaching about. Now, in terms of sort of the trickier things, there will be certain things that we have to teach. One of my previous schools the demographic was largely Turkish. There's lots of amazing Turkish writers, but we had to teach the kids around Shakespeare because that's what was going to be in their exam. And rather than sort of shying away from that, well, make part of the lesson about that conversation. That's fascinating. Why is it we're studying Shakespeare? Is it right? Isn't it? What else could we be studying? Why aren't we studying it? And so having that conversation in itself is adding diversity to your curriculum. It's taking a critical it's a critical eye or a critical view of your curriculum. And that in itself sort of helps, the problem almost becomes the solution, as cliched as that might sound. And so look at where it's incredibly hard to diversify your curriculum. Look at where you don't have choice, or look at where you're constrained by exams and time, let's be honest. And, that can be a part of a conversation, or that could be a part of a homework, or that could be part of, this is what we're doing. Maybe it's right, maybe it's not, but it's an interesting thing to discuss. There's some science examples here that my 10 minutes definitely won't allow for. So, and then last but not least is science, has been dominated by polymaths. It has, our curriculum makes it seem like it's all European white men. But first of all, we know that's not the case. But second of all, then move forward to what's currently happening in the field, who are currently the people making exciting discoveries, writing exciting books, doing exciting things. And then, then it's so much better and so much easier to diversify your curriculum. So we will skip ahead here for our time limit of 10 minutes. Just to mention, there's my email. If you have any questions, if you want anything, any of the literature we read, want to have a look at that. And if you want to look at some of the stuff we've done cross-curricular wise. But yeah, that is my 10 minutes up. Thank you very much.